One of the world's most valuable violins was stolen during World War II. This is the fate of the Mendelssohn Strad, an instrument that also spent decades hidden under a second identity. When I first learned about this story, I got goosebumps, and I decided to share it with you today in my first podcast. I am so excited for this new beginning, and I hope this is the first of many podcasts to come. Welcome to my channel. I am Melisma violin, violinist, and string instruments and bow specialist. Here, we dive deep into all things string instruments and bows, from luthier pro tips to bow makers, violin auctions, instrument market trends, and much more. If that's something you're interested about, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next videos. This video is also available in Spanish. I'm going to be uploading 2 episodes of the same topic, one in English, one in Spanish. Este video también está disponible en español. Copyright disclaimer. Some of the information in this episode is based on research and article published by Teresio and Carla Chapro. The content is presented for educational and informational purposes with adaptations and my own translations. I will leave the links below to Carla's research. She has specialized in studying and tracking down musical instruments stolen during the war in a project called Lost Music Project, as well as the article written by Teresio in their Cosio archive. On screen, I will be showing you some visual references of the instrument. So let's start by some context. Who was Antonio Stradivari? And why did I just say that the Strad violins are one of the most valuable in the world? Antonio Stradivari was a violin maker. He was born in northern Italy in 1644 in a small town that became known as the City of the Violin, Cremona. Today, around 600 instruments still remain. Stradivari had an extraordinary career, and he kept making instruments until his death in 1737 at the age of 93. He was very successful during his lifetime, but his instruments experienced true commercial boom at the end of the 19th century, thanks to the English firm W.E. Hill & Sons. They published a book called Antonio Stradivari, Life and Work. That helped these instruments to gain a reputation as a luxury items for musicians, collectors, and dealers. Today, the Stradivari instruments from his golden period can reach a commercial value between $10 and $20 million. Now, let's start the story of the stolen Mendelssohn Strad. But right before we continue, I want to share some important information with you. As a string instruments and bow specialist, violinist, and educator with over 10 years of experience, I am excited that I started offering a personalized consultation service for musicians and investors looking to buy instruments and bows. In our consultation, I will guide you through the entire process, making sure that you don't waste your time or money. In this way, you can acquire the best instrument that suits your taste, your budget, and your artistic needs. You can schedule your consultation directly from my website, melismaviolin.com. Go and book today. In the 1920s, the 1709 Mendelssohn Stradivari belonged to violinist Lili von Mendelssohn-Bohnke. I just wanted to say that I don't speak German. If it was English, Spanish, or French, it would be better, but I don't speak German, so I am probably not pronouncing right these German names, so I apologize for all my listeners. I know the correct pronunciation, but well, I'm gonna do my best. So, Lili Mendelssohn-Bohnke was a member of a prominent German family of bankers and musicians. Her father was a violinist, her uncle a cellist, and through a distant branch of her lineage, she was related to the composer Felix Mendelssohn. The family's private bank, Mendelssohn & Co., was founded in 1795 by her great-great-grandfather, and by the early 20th century, it had become one of Germany's most influential financial institutions. In 1928, Lili tragically died in a car accident, and her Stradivari was placed in the Mendelssohn Bank for safekeeping. So I want to read to you guys a quote from David F. Rosenthal, that is the grandson of Ludwig Mendelssohn-Bohnke, a musician. He is principal percussionist of the San Francisco Ballet Orchestra. And he says, I grew up hearing about this violin and its theft. And it always upset my mother, Lily Bohnke Rosenthal, when the subject came up. Most of us in the family thought that the 1709 Mendelssohn Stradivari violin had been destroyed since its theft from our family's bank safe in Berlin as a result of Nazi-era events. My uncle, Walter Bohnke, was among those who never gave up trying to find it. It was always known in our family as my grandmother's Lily's violin, and it's a vital piece of our Mendelssohn-Bohnke family's heritage. It connects us to our past in a very profound and emotional way. The war years. The Mendelssohn family was Jewish, and the Nazi racial laws of the mid-1930s made it illegal for Jews to own property. In December 1938, the Mendelssohn-Bohnke home was sold under duress, and the family bank was liquidated and absorbed by the Reichs Ministry of Finance. Most of the bank's assets went under the name of the Deutsche Bank. After World War II, the family was told that the Stradivari had been moved to the Deutsche Bank headquarters and had then disappeared. To this day, it is unclear whether it was confiscated by the Nazi regime or looted by the Soviet forces who occupied that part of Berlin. Either way, international law agrees this is a stolen instrument whose rightful ownership belongs to the descendants of the Mendelssohn-Bohnke family. Lily's youngest son, Walter, placed a stolen property notice in various publications, including an ad in the Strad magazine in September 1958. You can see that in the screen. Apart from that, and a mention in Herbert Goodking's 1978 book, Violin Iconography of Antonio Stradivari, there was no public record of the violin until 2009, when researcher Khaled Shapro wrote about it in the Strad. If you're enjoying this episode, don't forget to like, comment something, share with a musician friend. It's a free and a great way to support my work. 1 Stradivarius, 2 Identities. The 1709 Mendelssohn Stradivari wasn't just lost for 80 years. It also spent much of that time under another name, 1707 Stella. For decades, no one realized it was the same violin. Wow, such a plot twist. Let's find out what happened exactly. It all started with a questionable provenance document that surfaced in 2005, supposedly written by Parisian luthier Bernard Sabatier. It told a charming story about the name Stella and a noble family that kept the violin since the French Revolution. But years later, Sabatier denied writing it, and tellingly there was no mention of the Mendelssohn family. Before its disappearance in World War II, the violin was well documented. The Mendelssohn-Bohnke family had a 1930 appraisal and certificate of its authenticity from German expert Philipp Hammig, clearly stating the 1709 date in its internal label. After the theft, the trail went cold until 1995, when a Russian violinist brought it to Sabatier's workshop in Paris to sell. At the time, no one connected it to the Mendelssohn. Sabatier consulted British expert Charles Baer, who dated it between 705 and 710, and attributed it to Antonio Stradivari and his son Omobono. By the late 1990s, some experts began reading the label as 1707, something that can happen with old labels where a handwritten 7 is easily mistaken for a 9. Between 1995 and 2000, the violin changed hands several times, was even put up for auction at Teresio, but it was unsold, and ended up in private ownership. Over the time, it started circulating as the Stella. So what happened is that in 1995, a Russian violinist went to the workshop of Sabatier to try to sell the instrument. Sabatier got a certificate from Charles Baer, and he also made his own certificate saying that it was an Antonio Stradivari from 1707. The instrument sold that same year. And then about 10 years later, in 2005, is where this other document appears under the name also of Bernard Sabatier, that states that the violin belonged to a French family that went to exile during the French Revolution, and they have stored the violin since that moment. Bernard Sabatier still lives, and he has declared that he did not write this second document. So it's unknown who really wrote the document. And in this document, it also says that they put the name Stella, that its sound was so bright that it reminded them of a star. That's why it's called Stella. Then the most incredible twist came in 2024, when the Lost Music Project discovered the Stella and the Mendelssohn were the same violin. But how? The investigators received a clue that the violin may be in Japan. So they started digging deep in the Japanese internet. They first searched for Mendelssohn in 1709, nothing. Then they tried other dates and names, comparing old photos of the violin with current ones. And there it was, in Japan, listed as Stella with an invented backstory. The violin was ultimately identified thanks to a direct comparison between historic photographs published in the Strad magazine in 1958, when the Mendelssohn-Bohnke family issued a request for information about the stolen instruments, and the modern images circulating online under the name Stella. You can see the images on screen. The unique details of the wood, varnish, and shape matched perfectly, confirming that it was the same Strad that had been missing for 8 decades. The name change, altered date, and decades of silence made it almost impossible to trace. The violin resurfaced in 1995 in Sabatier's workshop. The last time the violin was mentioned was in 1958. So Sabatier and the other experts can have the benefit of the doubt, because maybe they didn't know it was the Mendelssohn Stradivari because of all the time that had passed between that last publication. If you want to know more details and the list of certifications in sales since 1995, you can read the full report in the website of Lost Music Project that is linked in the description. Today, the Mendelssohn-Bohnke family still hopes to sit down and find a cooperative solution to one of the most mysterious instrument theft cases in history. So that means that the Mendelssohn-Bohnke family still doesn't have the instrument. This is still a story that is developing. What I read is that because it's a private ownership, there's no exact record online of who actually owns the instrument. They believe it's in Tokyo, but that person hasn't confirmed that he owns the instrument. There is no declaration about it. And I personally think this is a really complicated situation because, the Mendelssohn-Bohnke family suffered so much, the car accident with Lily. Then during the war, they lost absolutely everything during the instrument. And now they find the instrument, but it's so hard to access because you can imagine that the Japanese person that bought the instrument surely paid a large amount of money out of it, and it had certificates and all these kind of documents that proved the violin origin. So I think it's quite complicated, but I would love to read you in the comments, how would you like the story to end? And if you enjoyed the podcast, I'll be reading each of your comments and responding to all of them. If you're in YouTube, I invite you to watch this video about Antonio Stradivari, his life, and the enigma and mystery around his instruments. Thank you very, very much for being here. I'll see you in the next podcast. Love you all. Bye.